outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm. And I have a great guest today, someone I've known probably longer than he wants me to mention, and that is Prince Chambliss. Prince is a well-known lawyer here in Memphis. He was, at the time when I started practicing law, he was a partner at the Armstrong Allen firm, where I started, and that's where I first met him. And now he's an assistant city attorney. Prince, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alan. Very nice to be here with you.
Well, as I said in the open, you're one of the first lawyers I ever saw practice law up close. And so a lot of what I do, I've emulated from you. How did you decide that law was your calling?
Well, growing up as a child, I thought I was going to be a scientist. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and we had in our yard, I mean, just growing up, there were garter snakes and frogs and crawfish and butterflies and insects. And as a child, I would play with those, and I would collect them. But when I got into school, I got to be a junior, and I discovered chemistry. And chemistry and I didn't get along very well. And so I thought I might have to change course. And about the same time, I was reminded my grandfather was a lawyer, and he was licensed in Alabama in 1911. And they say he was the first Black law school graduate to be admitted to practice in the state of Alabama. And I also had two uncles who were lawyers. And so it seems like law runs in the family. I have a brother who retired as a judge just recently. I have a daughter who's a law school graduate, and she graduated from the same law school as her great-grandfather exactly 100 years after he did. So we call the law our family business.
Well, which law school was that?
That was Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Now, growing up African-American in the South, it strikes me in that time period that it would have been unusual to see, unfortunately, to see so many lawyers in an African-American family. Am I wrong about that, or how did that work?
Well, it just happened. Our family just kind of gravitated towards the law. And of course, there were so many things that needed the law that needed to be fixing that it just seemed a natural thing to do.
Where did you attend law school?
I went to Harvard University, and you probably don't know this, Alan, but I had two very famous classmates. Mitt Romney and Chuck Schumer were both law school classmates of mine. It's kind of hard to imagine both of them in the same class, but they were.
Well, you look better than both of them.
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate that.
So it looks like that the U.S. Senate may be in your future then.
Well, no, I'm very content here at City Hall. I tell people to consider me their friend at City Hall.
Well, I got to ask this question. Were they just in your class, or did you know them? Can you give us any insight into either one of them?
Well, the first year of school, Mitt Romney and I were in the same section. And so we took all of our classes together. So I got to know him, but the next year I didn't see him. And what happened, he enrolled in a joint degree program So when he graduated, he actually graduated a year later with both a law degree and a master's in business administration.
I see.
And Chuck Schumer, I didn't know at all, but I did discover later that he was a class member, and I've attended class reunions about every 5 years, and to my knowledge, neither one of them has found the time to attend our class reunions.
Well, that's a loss for them. Well, very good. Now, one thing I understand that about 10 years ago, you wrote a book about your life, Prince of Peace. Is that right?
That is right, Alan. And what prompted that was I moved with my family to Memphis about 45 years ago. And the reason was that after returning to Birmingham, I clerked for a judge, and I had always wanted to practice in a large law firm, and that wasn't possible in Birmingham, Alabama at that time. I did make application, and the firms, they tried real hard, but at that time, there were no firms that were large that had African-American lawyers, and that was something that I thought I should be able to do, having done well in school and having gone to the good schools that I did attend. And I had attended school, both college and also in law school, with classmates who were from Memphis. And so they told me that things weren't going to work out well in Birmingham, and they asked me to try to come to Memphis. I made application here in Memphis, and the largest law firm at that time in the state employed me as an attorney, and I spent 25 years there.
What was there a particular partner who drove that decision? What do you attribute that decision? Because you were a groundbreaker in that you were the first one to be hired, and then you were the first African-American partner in a Memphis law firm. Is that right?
That is correct. And I think there were a lot of things going on, but Dr. King had been assassinated here only about 8 years prior to that. And I think people were thinking that something needed to be done to put the city on the proper course.
Well, and that firm was Armstrong Allen.
That's right.
Yeah, and it had at the top of that firm were just some legendary lawyers. Walter Armstrong, of course, being chief among them, and Tom Pruitt Sr. and others. And what was it like to practice in that particular firm with those lawyers?
Well, it was daunting, to say the least. I mean, those lawyers were at the top of their craft. They were very good at what they did, and I worked hard, and I studied, and I watched them, and I learned, and I was very fortunate. But Tom Pruitt Sr. took me under his wing and taught me so much and allowed me to be in court with him, and I learned so much practicing with him. One of the things he used to say was that you can't practice law sitting behind a desk. You have to get your feet muddy. And we would go out and we would find out what was involved. Generally, there was something that had been alleged that it didn't go right. And if there was some apparatus, some machinery involved, he wanted to know everything about it. And we would find one, and he would ask questions, and he would find out exactly what it was that supposedly went wrong. And he would say, if you don't know what went wrong, if you don't know what happened, you'll never be able to explain it to the judge and to the jury.
I rode in the elevator with Mr. Pruitt once, and that was my sole interaction with him, because by the time I got there, he was towards the end of his career. And he asked me how I liked the firm, and I said I liked it very much. And he said, "Are you going on vacation this summer?" Well, I had just started. It was August. And I said, "No, sir. I'm focused on getting settled." And he said, "Let me tell you something. You can practice more law in 11 months than you can in 12. And about that time, the door opened. He went his way and I went mine. But that comment in a lot of ways was way ahead of its time. But that's my Tom Pruitt Sr. story. And I've never forgotten that. You've got to take time, I think, practicing law. You got to take time out to recharge.
Yes, and he also thought that taking time off would also help your practice by allowing you to do some things other than concentrate on law. And it was surprising if you spent time reading or in hobbies, those things could have some bearing on your ability to practice law well.
Yeah, I think we've lost as a profession, through the 80s and 90s. We've lost some of that because it's so fast paced now that you don't really have time to breathe. But taking a little bit of time for yourself, there's nothing selfish about that. That it really does help. It helps your mindset, I think.
Yes.
Well, tell me more about the book. What was your goal in writing the book? What were you trying to? What message were you trying to convey to the reader?
Well, I've heard a saying as I was growing up. I aspire to inspire before I expire. So I wanted to just share the life that I've had, the things I've seen, what I've done, people that I've met, and hoping that by reading about what I've done, that other people would feel inspired and would go on to do things of their own. I was in Birmingham when the civil rights movement was going strong down there. And that was one thing that prompted me to write the book. Was when we moved here, it hadn't been that long that those little girls in Birmingham were killed in a church bombing on a Sunday morning. And I was about 15 years old at that time, and I was in Sunday school when the explosion occurred. And the church that I attended was only about 6 blocks away from 16th Street Baptist Church. And I left Sunday school. I and friends of mine, we ran to the church. You could see when you went outside, the smoke was above the church. And we ran to the church, and the police commissioner, Eugene Bull Connor, was there. We heard the explosion. We went out, we saw it, we ran, and he was there. I mean, we couldn't understand how could he? And so, and it turns out those little girls were friends of mine. One was a classmate in my homeroom class. One was a sister of a girl in my homeroom class. One was the daughter of my homeroom teacher, and one was a friend. And it was the first time in my then young life that someone had died who hadn't been ill or wasn't old. And so, I mean, it just struck me. I mean, it was something that will stick with me my entire life. But I've learned you don't dwell on negative things, and you try to make things positive. And I've always been an optimistic person. So good things can come from bad things.
How did that particular event affect you as it related to your outlook on a hopeful future? Because a lot of people would see something like that and say, man, I can't imagine what's going through your mind, what pressure that would put on someone in your situation. But you chose to, as you just said, you chose to look at the positive. How do you go from that to pursuing a professional career?
I've always wanted to make things better. And so I had an opportunity very shortly after that. When I was 16, I was selected to participate in a program to travel to Connecticut, to live in a home with upper class white family, took me in as a member of the family. I attended the local high school, and amazingly, there were people in that town in Connecticut who did not want me to attend the high school. I was the only black person at that high school, and I was required to pay non-resident tuition. And that was a negative, but it turned into a positive because a group of people in the town, they got together to pay the non-resident tuition. And they said, as long as we're paying his high school non-resident tuition, we'll keep raising money and we'll pay all of his college expenses that a scholarship doesn't cover. And so as a result of that opposition, I knew that things in the North weren't all peaches and cream. I mean, at that time, people thought, oh, the South is so bad, the South is so bad. But when I went up to Connecticut, I had decided for myself, I would get the best education that I can. But when I'm done with my education, I'm returning to the South. And I tried to return to Birmingham. I did all I could, but Memphis is not that far away. But growing up, my mother has said, someone in this family is going to attend an Ivy League school. And of course, I was the oldest, and so they thought that I should be the one who should try to do that. But we didn't really know where the Ivy League schools were. But we had an idea that they were in the Northeast somewhere. And so when I had the opportunity to come to Connecticut, it was thought that that was a step towards attending an Ivy League school.
And it turned out to be so.
That's amazing.
So many questions come to mind. Looking back, from there to now, it depends on who you talk to, I guess, but a lot of people look back and see a lot of progress. A lot of people look back and see very little progress. What's your perspective on where we are as a community, Memphis particularly, with just getting along with one another, no matter what our race is?
Alan, if I think about how things were as a child growing up, I can remember going on vacation to Florida. And we were at Fort Walton Beach, which is right near Destin, which we call South Memphis now. There was a metal stake that was in the ground on the beach and had a chain that went out into the ocean. And about a mile or so out, there was another chain and stake. And on one side it said white, and on one side it said colored. And we would be in the water, and I was a child, I would go underwater and I'd come up on the white side. I'd tell my dad, I'm on the white side. He said, boy, get yourself back over here. But that's the life we had then. And so what we have now is so dramatically different. So we have made great strides, but we still have so much further to go. As far as race and gender. I can remember as a young lawyer at the Armstrong firm, I would have a luncheon in the summer when there were students who were here and they were working at the large law firms, African-American students. I would find out who they were and where they were, and I would invite them to lunch. We all sat at one table. Well, it wasn't very long. I would do that every summer. And each summer, the numbers would grow and the numbers would grow. And so it got to be a point. And of course, I was paying the bill. I was the lawyer. I was inviting them. And it got to a point where I said, well, wait a minute. So I called on the Bar Association. I said, look, I'm doing this luncheon, but it's getting to be too much for me. And they thought it was a good idea to have those young people come together for a luncheon. And so the organized bar picked up the bill for the luncheon. But we have made a lot of progress, but we still have so much further to go.
In some circles, religious circles, you could talk about interior change and exterior change. And it seems that we've made a lot of progress with the exterior. As you point out, you go to Fort Walton today, and there's not a chain going out into the ocean. You go to the zoo, and there's not a whites day or a colored day or all the segregation that you and I could name. And so a lot of the external things are gone, but I think where we've got to work is with the interior, people's private thoughts and their attitudes and beliefs. What positives do you see happening now that would lead you to believe that maybe we're on our way to that interior change we need?
People have to work on themselves. Michael Jackson has a song, "The Man in the Mirror." And I learned over the years, if I wanted to know who was responsible for the problem that I had, who was responsible for my misfortune, I learned I could go in the bathroom, turn on the light, and look in the mirror, and there was the culprit. We're generally our own worst enemies, and yet we're always looking for someone to blame. We're saying, well, if it wasn't for that person, then this would be this way. If it wasn't for this person, then things would be better. But we need to work on ourselves first. And if everybody worked on themselves, changed themselves, and became a better person, the world would be a better place. So we need to convince people that you need to work on yourself. Get people to realize you may think you're perfect, but there's some improvement that can be made. And if everyone improved, it'd be a much better place.
It would indeed. It would indeed. Switch gears a little bit here. You've had a very successful legal career. Share with us, a couple of your big wins, your highlights. What are you most proud of so far in a distinguished legal career that certainly isn't over by any stretch of the imagination?
Well, I can think of specific cases where I was successful and it made a change in the law. And there are particular things. I mean, there's a rule now that governmental entities, if you take a non-suit, that's it. You can't sue that governmental entity again. At that way back in the old days when I was practicing, it wasn't clear cut. It wasn't known, but I had a case that involved what is called the saving statute. And the Tennessee Supreme Court had a special session and held court here in Memphis at the law school. And so the audience was full of law students. And when we went forward with the hearing, it was so clear that they were going to make a change and make it clear that the saving statute didn't apply to governmental entities. I was representing the Memphis Board of Education as a contract attorney, as outside counsel. And when the plaintiff's attorney, appellant, arose and spoke, he was grilled to such an extent that when it came time for my presentation, I wanted to pass. It was so clear, but I had to get up and I said some things and I answered some questions. But I was that was a case, and that case still stands today, and it has made a vast difference in the way that governmental entities are able to conduct business.
Well, very good. That's the great thing about practicing law is it's a great profession. Mentally, it definitely is always challenging, but you can have such a profound impact on the world and on your community as a lawyer, and that's what I've enjoyed doing as a lawyer.
Yes, well, a summary judgment. I've had many cases that involve summary judgment, and even when it seems like the law was changing to make it more difficult for defendants to be successful, I was able to show, and I lectured in seminars and I was able to demonstrate, in spite of what appearances seemed to be, it was still possible for a defense counsel to obtain summary judgment.
Well, as a plaintiff's lawyer, I'm not so wild about that one. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Well, Prince, I appreciate your time. We're going to throw up on the screen here. We've had a picture of your book in the corner the whole time, but here's a little the Amazon link on where you can buy it if you're interested in buying it. It's a great read, fascinating read, and I think you'll if you read it, not only will you know obviously a lot more about my friend Prince Chambliss, but I think you get a pretty good idea of what it was like in that period to make the transitions that someone had to make from the civil rights movement to I don't know, I guess 2022, wherever we are now in 2022. I agree with you. We've got a lot of work to do, but thank God a lot of those things we talked about are no longer the case. Your friend, my friend, Tanera Gibson, who is a partner at Birch, Porter & Johnson, does a lot of work for the city, I know. She's the first African-American female president of the Memphis Bar Association. And, you know, if she were on, I know she would thank you for your leadership and the path that you blazed for other African-American lawyers. Because of what you did, it was a lot easier for them to pursue a career, and I'm sure they thank you for that.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. Everybody, this is Alan Crone, CEO of the Crone Law Firm. Thank you for watching this podcast. If you enjoyed it, of course you did. It was very insightful and interesting. Please share us on social media, comment. If you have ideas for future shows, please let me know. For my guest, Prince Chambliss, he's going to go and defend the city. And I'm also going to go and get some justice. So thank you all very much. And I'll see you next time on Ask Alan.